I thought POW was just such an inspiring organization with their story of, creating very positive narratives around climate.
Welcome to reVyven, where environmental ideas come to life. At reVyven, we aim to connect, learn, and make a difference.
So today we're here with Maren Stuber, who is the deputy head for the organization and leading on campaigns and projects for Protect Our Winter Switzerland. Did I get that right, Maren?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for joining us today. We're doing this online, which we typically do in person, but it's nice that we have the opportunity to meet with you. So thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Let's talk a bit about your background. It looks like from the research that we've conducted that you have a history of working in really inspiring spaces, from the work you're currently doing with Protect Our Winter Switzerland to working with the UN Refugee Agency.
Yeah.
Why is this type of work so important to you?
So I have a background in social science with focus on inequalities. So I guess I was always driven by questions around like why is it that some people just seem to have more chances than others, and how do we move people to be kind of kind to each other and like change social structures and take good care of our environments and just make sure that all people can live a good life. And I think, I mean, just with recent politics, I guess we're quite far from it, but I think that's kind of the overall drive that connected my interests, even though they might not seem so connected at first sight. But yeah, so I started working in international organizations and was working in ethics for the UN for quite a bit, UNHCR specifically, as you said. And I think the idea with that was always to understand like ethics. That's the question is always like, why do people do bad things? Like why are we not able to be like ethically always on the right track?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's a question that you can apply to many spaces. And I think what I learned through this work is that there's a lot of like not an environment, not in the climate sense, but like I guess circumstantial factors that influence the way that we make decisions and the that basically lead us to not be the best version of ourselves. And I think that's why I got so interested in campaigning work. And I mean, then I'm just also personally very passionate about environmental issues, and I thought that POW was just such an inspiring organization with their story of creating very positive narratives around climate justice, or like to say, okay, look, we've all got this problem, and we all know that we're not perfect, but we know that people are very passionate about mountain spaces and they see the changes firsthand. So how can we use that kind of stoke for mountains and snow sports and sports in general to turn that into meaningful climate action? And so I think I thought that was so powerful. And then, I ended up working for them, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic organization. And I commend you for taking the time to think about these bigger questions in life, because sometimes I think some of it involves a lot of thought, sometimes pain, but sometimes we brush over them. But they are fundamental to us as humans, but in a global space, they're really essential. So it's really nice to have a conversation with someone who thinks about this on such a deep level. And how, Maren, how did you get involved with Protect Our Winters Switzerland?
I think a bit of a classic story. I think because I'm a very outdoorsy person myself and I love to be in the mountains, I saw their work around. I mean, if you move around like ski areas or like you have a lot of friends, you start noticing the stickers, or like at some point I saw stuff that they put on social media. So I think I was like, huh, what are these people doing? And like started looking at some of their events and got maybe, just like more interested in um stuff that was happening here and there. And then at some point I saw that they had a job opening, and I was like, okay, I'll just give it a try, even though I might not have the very like normal profile for somebody to work there. I was like, this could actually, like, for me, it made a lot of sense. So that's how I got involved.
Yeah, I love that that sometimes we enter spaces that we're not necessarily versed in, but we do it anyway, and it leads to such a beautiful path or journey for us. So I think that's really nice. And can you tell us a bit about the origin story of Protect Our Winners as a whole, when they got started? What's their origin story?
Yeah, of course. So Protect Our Winners was started in 2007 in the US by a professional snowboarder, Jeremy Jones, who I think, as many people at the time, was like flying all over the place and like doing all of these rad videos. But he was noticing changes in the mountains as he was going to the mountains every season, and he saw like snow is different, and it's like snowpack varies from season to season and gets less. And he noticed the power in actually witnessing the changes in mountain landscapes as outdoor athletes, or like I guess also snowboarders. And so he came up with this idea to make, yeah, like create a movement around this and turn outdoor people into climate activists, or like get people passionate in the first place, maybe about climate issues that we see going to the mountains. So from that on, over the years, many different chapters in different countries were founded. In Switzerland, the founder, Nicola Bornstein, he founded it in 2017. There's now many chapters in like Austria, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, like all over, basically, even in New Zealand and Japan. Um, and in Switzerland, I think, yeah, it all started as a very small like NGO. He did it on the side, like he had a full-time job in the beginning, and then over the years built a functioning organization with now 6 part-time employees. So that's where we're at today.
Oh, that's fantastic. And something you said that I think is so important to touch on is the fact that when you spend time outside, and in Switzerland, we're quite privileged that we have such accessibility to the Alps, to lakes, to beautiful nature areas, is that if you're paying attention and you're immersed in the natural world, you do notice changes. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, we feel that so profoundly with the work that we've done. And we always say, if you're outside, you can understand that the environment that we love is definitely changing. And so this is really nice that Jeremy Jones was able to take action on that and to start an organization that's drawing attention to those changes in a positive way. So that's fantastic. And I like that you said that the focus in Switzerland is to really have a positive and emotional communication in order to channel the passion for nature and the mountains into concrete climate protection measures. I think that's really important. And it's nice. There's so many times when we look at the environmental issues, it can be rather negative. But if
Yeah,
we
yeah,
look at
for
it
sure.
from a positive way, or try to paint it in a more positive way, or give some agency back to individuals, I think that makes us feel that it's not hopeless, that there is hope, that we can ignite change.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a super important point. I think that's at the core of like any social or environmental movement. I think we know that we're all in this like for the long haul. Like this is not, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, as I like to say. And I think we can see like the ebbs and flows of, I guess, passion around the climate movement. And at the moment, we're in maybe a bit more of a difficult spell in this whole process. So that's why it's so important to get people motivated again and again to show why it's worth it, because it's very tiring. Like we have a lot of work to do. We don't have a lot of time left. Um, and I think we also have many people with interests that are not very much in favor of the environment or the climate. Um, so it's almost basic psychology to say, look, if in all of these difficult times, we also perceive the work that we're doing as difficult, that's not going to motivate us, and that's going to inhibit us. We know that, like, from a psychological point of view, if you enable people, if they feel empowered, and they associate positive things with it, they can like basically free up way more energy to put to a cause than if they feel inhibited and slow and things feel difficult. So I think it's very logical, and yet it's not common sense to think about this way in a climate movement. And I think that's also for a long time been the challenge, that there's many or many campaigns and many movements around the climate argued a lot about around like the difficulties and the risks that we face and like the little time that we have left. And I mean, I say that too, and it's true, and it's also important to mention that, but we can't stop there. We need to kind of look to the future and create the positive image of what a climate neutral future could look like for us and all the positive things that it could hold for us too, because like otherwise we won't want to live in that future. And I think that's where I see a lot of chance in creating positive narratives.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think as citizens, individuals want to be engaged and they want to kind of have a hands-on proactive way that they can see that even if it's something very small, that it does make a difference as a whole. I think that's really important. And who makes up the organization? Like, who is on the type of people who are on the board of directors who make up the organization as a whole? You mentioned that there are 6 people now working for POW.
Yeah.
And then how involved are citizens, or do you have a volunteer group?
Yeah, so we have maybe I'll start with like the office and like the people that work with POW directly. So the 6 people that we work in like communication, in politics, well, basically like the different parts of the POW, basically anything that's POW's work, which is focused at politics, focused at like communicating about our work, organizing projects and campaigns, and yeah, just generally, I guess, like holding everything together. So we're quite a young team, and as I said, we're all working part-time, and the office is in Zurich. And then around this core, we have a network of what we call the alliances. So we have athletes. POW likes to communicate around athletes as ambassadors because they can inspire us, and they can also show that basically, well, whatever they see in the mountains. And we have some like quite big names like Michel Giesin, Daniel Juhl, and quite I want to say like traditional sports like downhill skiing. But we also have like we're growing the network with people who are in biking, running, climbing. So not only winter focused, but like all sorts of sports. And with that, we reach communities that are maybe a bit further outside from our core community, which is super nice because that means that we can communicate to audiences that we don't or that we wouldn't normally reach. Then we have a lot of other alliances such as scientists. We have guides, mountain guides. We have brands. And so with these, we work together for like specific causes. Like, for example, if we organize an event where we need a scientific input or we want to communicate about the latest climate facts, we're going to work with our Science Alliance. If we put on an event such as our annual parliamentarian ski tour, we're gonna work with one of the guides to take us there. And then lastly, we have a network of creatives such as like videographers, photographers, or illustrators that also help us get a message across that is not just like cognitively driven, but also like shows the emotional. Like, I mean, if you look at really nice pictures or if you see like beautiful videos of the mountains, I think you can reconnect on a different level. And so that's a really important element of our work as well, that we try to have really nice or like high quality visual content.
Yeah.
And that's what we work on with them. So that's our network. And then, as you said, civil society and the people around it. We have a lot of volunteers. So people can, on our website, just sign up as a volunteer and like drop in some of the skills that they might want to offer. And so for different occasions, we work with the volunteers. We offer training sometimes. So for example, if volunteers go to events for us, we kind of do like a very short introduction on like what's POW, what's the approach, and what to know. But then we also ask them for very specific things like, oh, we need graphic support, or we need support on like an IT solution, or we need like translation. So things like this. And it's really great because for the volunteers, it feels like that really makes the community come alive. And I think we can really feel that for like whenever we have a community event and you see the people that are like really excited about the work and we get to actually meet them. I think that's sometimes it can feel a bit long, the times between actually meeting in person when you're just doing your work at the office and yes, we're communicating, but we don't see them.
Mm.
But yeah, that's basically the community. Oh, I forgot the board of directors that you mentioned. Yeah, so we have a board of directors that's made up of specialists in all sorts of domains that are relevant to our work, such as politics. So, I mean, we have a strong connection with politics. We want to have a systemic impact, so it's important for us that we reach politicians. We have somebody with a scientific background to make sure that everything that we do is also scientifically sound. We have somebody with more of a marketing, I guess, campaigning background to make sure that we also produce compelling content that's relevant to people. And also brand perspective to be sure that the partner brands that we work with are well represented, or like the interests and well, that we align our interests with their interests in climate action.
Yeah. It sounds like you certainly have a very diverse group of people
Yes.
working with the organization, which is fantastic. And I think something you mentioned and touched on is how the volunteers can get involved, which is really important because I feel that there is this citizen movement of people who are really hungry to get involved, really kind of get their hands dirty and approach it with a hands-on approach to making a difference. So I think that's nice that you open it up to the community. And the next question I have for you, Maren, is what role does education play in the preservation of our winters in Switzerland?
I mean, I think at the end, education is the basis for any action. If we don't know why we need to act and why it's important that we act now, we're not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like somebody who is educated and somebody who also sees kind of the connection between individual action and more collective action, that person will know why they're doing what they're doing every day, and they will also know why it's worth it to make a difficult choice and not go for like the short-term solution, maybe that's more polluting. So I think for us, the theory of change that's linked to it is that if we can educate people and get them excited individually, they're going to also support the systemic action that we need. And I think we know that only like on a bigger scale, systemic level change in terms of policies, that's what's needed. Otherwise, I think it's going to be hard to see the tangible climate solutions actually be turned into practice, or put into practice fast enough. Mm-hmm. But at any of those systemic actions, there was at some point somebody who was like emotionally maybe attached to an idea. I think we can really see that it's not just we can not like think that it's just a cognitive choice that somebody makes. I think like any, and maybe it's not quite the question that you asked, but I think it's really related to the educational element, because I think education can seem like it's very like conscious choice. Like somebody who is educated around a cause will be like, oh, I know now that if I eat like less meat, this will result in X number of CO2 emissions saved. I don't think it's that easy, but I think people who experiment basically with like a different individual approach and say like, oh, I'm going to start eating less meat, and they discover that actually it's really fun to try out new recipes, or they take the train and they realize that it can be super nice to just be taking the journey on the train instead of queuing in a traffic jam all the time. They will feel that there's like a personal change that's happening and a personal growth, and that is a very emotional experience that will then get them hooked on the bigger cause. And I think that's why for me it's so powerful to have education, because that changes people as a whole. It's like it's such an enriching thing.
Yeah. I think it goes along with the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And so by letting people understand, and you have this science piece behind it, which is really important. So I think by promoting the education, we just expand the minds of people, for that's really important. And while we're kind of on this topic, I'd like to go a little bit into kind of the science of it, or really the topography of Switzerland, because where we are is such a beautiful country, and it's something, we're not from Switzerland, but it's something that we've never ever taken for granted. And we are a nation that's comprised of glaciers. We have a big tourist industry around snow. So, can you
Mhm.
just give us a little bit of background on, maybe we talk on the glaciers, because the United Nations World Day for Glaciers was
Mhm.
just March 21st. And then we were reading that the United Nations has also declared 2025 as the International Year of Glaciers. So
Yeah.
glaciers in Switzerland are a really paramount part of the topography of the landscape. And why are glaciers here so important? But how does that also affect the world?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think Switzerland, if you think of Switzerland, you think of mountains and you also quickly think of glaciers. You have images of Aletsch Glacier and other big glaciers in your head. Um, so I think we can't imagine Switzerland without glaciers. That's first of all, like, I think for me, that's such a big thing. Like, imagine you come to this country and there's no glaciers left. Like, that would be so sad. And I think that's something that we um, can't, like, we need to kind of underline that because it's very realistic that just like 1.5 generations from now, people will not see glaciers anymore if we don't put the measures in place to lower emissions. I think that's a very like emotional connector,
Hmm.
but that's so like linked to the Swiss identity. So I think that's something that I have still a hard time wrapping my head around. But I think going more to a scientific point of view, we see that a lot of glaciers have already disappeared. Actually, question for you: do you know how many glaciers there are in Switzerland?
Thank you for asking. I did, yes. I think the number every time you look it up is a little bit different, but I believe roughly 1,800. Am I?
So the latest number is
Yeah.
1,400.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Oh.
But I mean, anyway, if it just to say, like, I think that's massive. It's a
Mhm.
lot of them are not really well known. It's also like small ice masses that are still left, and some of them don't even have names. But like, it's so many, and
Mhm.
the sad thing is that so many, like, only in the last 45 years, I think 750 have disappeared. So imagine that, like, if we just kind of go fast forward 45 years, like how many more will have disappeared? And all of these like small ice masses, they have such a long history. They've been there for like ages. And I think that's something that if you start kind of going into it, it's really fascinating to think about the glaciers. But then the like less emotional and more like really facts-based issues around glaciers is like their massive supplies of natural water.
Mhm.
Um, Switzerland is a country that has around 60% of its electricity coming from hydropower. And we know that basically now we're at peak water. So whatever comes down as water, actually it's a bit masked. I think this was the most recent result that came out of the Glacial Research Center in Switzerland, saying that basically the excess melting water that we have had in the past couple of years have masked the actual risks for drought and like the lowered water levels that we already have. So basically, with the fact that we are now at peak water, so to say, means that with more and more glaciers retreating, less and less water will melt over the summer, which means that we will have way more problems with droughts and stuff coming up in the future. And we will also see even like big rivers such as, I don't know, Rhone or the Rhine have way less water than we see now. So I think we can only imagine the like what we call like also downstream effects of glacial melt in Switzerland.
Mhm.
Um, that it has now, like until now, been a country that's been really blessed with a lot of water. And I think we can see in neighboring countries already the problems that come from droughts and heat waves over the summers. So yeah, that's one thing with the, I think that's maybe one of the most obvious ones. but now I'm like, I'm not sure anymore of your question. Sorry.
No, I think you answered it perfectly. The question was really, why are glaciers so important to the Swiss
Yeah.
landscape, and how is it affect us globally? But I think what you said, you touched on really key points here, which is the emotional connection. And even if we're not from Switzerland to say that again, but we've been tracking the Rhone Glacier on the Furka
Mhm.
Pass because it's so accessible. So if anyone wants to see a glacier but doesn't want to do extensive hiking, or they just kind of want to have a feel for it to understand it, that glacier is so powerful in that its retreat is so visible. We
Mhm.
visit it every year, even though it's really painful to witness it,
Mhm.
because the retreat is so rapid. And I think the point of the emotional connection, particularly for the Swiss, but even for someone who's aware of the problems that the glaciers are facing, we really have a very emotional reaction to it every year. And for
Yeah.
us, we have children. So, what you said, in a generation or two, the thought of Switzerland being ice free is just,
Yeah.
it's almost painful because it changes the entire topography, the entire landscape. It really alters it. But to think that our children may not be able to witness that is really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It also, like you said, it also spreads far wider than just the emotional connectivity, is that these are major sources of fresh water, and it has such a ripple effect. I mean, even local to us in Basel, one of our favorite hiking routes has been permanently closed because of drought. And the
Mhm.
trees that are there are beech trees. They don't have a deep root system, so they're no longer able to draw up water. So the trees are just falling over. The area is no longer safe for
Yeah.
hiking, which is really sad. And it's just far reaching. It impacts biodiversity. I remember when we went to the Aletsch Glacier, they have a free museum, and they were just talking about certain insects and microorganisms that live exclusively in the ice.
Yeah.
And we think of them as very small and insignificant, but really they're part of a greater whole. And
For sure.
yeah, they are, we need them. So without the ice, it's really catastrophic. So I think it's really important. And I think it's important for people, if you haven't seen a glacier, to really look at it, but look at it not from just the lens of, oh, this is big or it's beautiful, but look to the walls, the side of the glacier. You can see where it used to be. You can also look up historical pictures from the past of how far that glacier came down into valleys and
Yeah.
how significant the retreat is when you're standing there. I think these visuals, like you said, this is part of POW, is that you have these visuals, or you tell stories, or you have pictures which are so profound for people.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is part of the education, really, is getting people
Yeah.
yeah, connect, but seeing, understanding, this is really, really important.
I think that's so important, actually, that point, because we call glaciers the harbingers of climate change for a
Mm.
reason. Because it's, maybe there's some kind of extreme weather when event, there's like a rainfall that was really extreme, or there's a really dry summer, and you can be like, oh, this is unusual, but I don't know, like it can seem kind of a bit of a erratic thing to happen. Like it's hard to track, or like it's hard to mentally track what's going on there, or like to make the connection between everything that's happening. But I think if you go to a glacier, as you say, like if you visit a glacier every year and you see how it retreats every year, and that's a very like linear thing that you can witness, that is so powerful, because it's so clear, and the connection between, okay, it's getting warm and this glacier is like warmer and this glacier is retreating every year, is like, it's so stark. And I think that's why their message is their message to us is so important, and we should really listen to it.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say this before we kind of move on, but I read that in 2019 there was a group of individuals who went to the Piso Glacier, and they conducted a funeral because it had lost
Yes.
so much ice mass that it's no longer considered a glacier. And I think that that act is an act to say how the emotional connection, but how reliant we really are on these masses of ice, and they have such profound and deep history within them. It's
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, I think that I read about this event and I think it's so powerful because it also makes these glaciers visible to us. And it shows, like otherwise maybe if you don't go there, like 1 year was there and the next year you come, it's like, oh, this glacier's gone. Huh, I wonder what happened. And I think by like doing something like a funeral for a glacier, you actually honor its history and like
Mm,
it's been there for so much longer than like, I mean, generations and generations will have been able to visit this glacier and like all one day it's just gone.
mhm.
And yeah, I think it's really for me it's like really important to make that more visible.
Yeah.
Well, one topic that I think POW has done is the FIS races. Yeah, I think in Zermatt,
Yes.
one in Austria, and I think the campaign that you put across that was actually really, it's heartbreaking, but it was very important. Is that something that you can talk about?
Yeah, I think that's a really good example actually. So it all started with these images of the excavators on the glacier showing
Mm,
up. So we noticed that and we just made a post about it. We're like, look, this isn't timely anymore. In times of like glacier loss, like we see it, you shouldn't be digging up glaciers for ski races. It's just not okay. And we put this post up and it somehow really quickly went viral. And we're like, oh, this touched a nerve. Like people are really, really upset about this. So it's something that happened in like a really short amount of time and developed really quickly. And we're like, we got to do something because the community is really upset. So that's why we launched the petition against the FIS to push them for a more meaningful sustainability action and to also push them towards moving the race. Because basically, what happened was that they had to move the race already, I think, 1 year before, because in late October, early November, the weather conditions are rarely actually favorable for a race. So in the end, like that year, 2023, they had to cancel it again because I think there were strong winds or something. Like it's just not conducive to having a race at that time of the year and that altitude. And I think there was a lot of interest behind it that were driven by financial reasons, that wanted to have a race there, which is fine, but not late in the season. And I think a lot of people said, look, you can have that race in March, April, just push it later on in the season, but there wasn't any interest in that. And so I think it was really powerful to see the whole community saying like, this is enough. Like
Yeah.
you can't bend nature for this economic interest and for a prestige event that is just not meant to happen at that time of the year at that altitude. So yeah, I think it caused quite a lot of reactions. I think, yeah, we had supporters like big names like Michaela Schifrin. We had a lot of signatures worldwide. Within 2 weeks, I think we had more than, or like in the first couple of days, we had more than like 30,000 signatures. So it hit a nerve, and I think that was really important. And I I'm quite happy we did it, even though obviously it's always hard to go into. It's not nice to push against a federation like that because I think we also really value dialogue,
mhm.
but sometimes you also got to show that there's limits to what you can do. And sometimes I think there needs to be a bit of a stronger voice. And I think that's what we reached with that.
Well, maybe it's also calling them out on what they're not doing or what they could do better.
Exactly.
I don't think it's that far reaching.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. You got to have different instruments, I guess, for different
Mhm.
reasons. You can keep the dialogue up, and try in a nice way to remind them to put measures in place and maybe to also like not sell, some kind of positive measures in a, I guess you could call it greenwashing way,
Yeah,
but to actually do something.
yeah. And this sounds like this is kind of the power of an organization like POW, that you can raise awareness to issues. This is a prime example, but that create a broader reach and maybe set a precedent for future races, for race organizations on a global level to think differently about sacred spaces, about um,
Yeah,
what we really need to protect and preserve at all costs. And sometimes that may require a mind shift or a reorganization. But I think the work you did on that was probably difficult, but really essential. Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. No, I think it's really nice. Very good. And Maren, I just have a question, and I'm just curious from an interconnectivity point with the other POW organizations on a global level, do you ever work with, let's say, in close contact with the US group or maybe the Italian group or the French group to kind of put your heads together and come up with new or meaningful projects or ideas?
Yeah, for sure. So we have regular exchange on an EU level.
Mm,
Um, and then for specific projects, like sometimes there's things like a Strava challenge or like we have a mobility month that comes every year. So that's projects that we host together and we exchange for these specific types of projects.
mm,
And we try to coordinate our actions to be sure that whatever we're pushing, for example, if it's, I mean, this is less relevant to the Swiss context and more to the other EU countries, but if we want to be sure to be pushing something on an EU level, of course, we need to coordinate and get the different communities united around the shared cause. Yeah,
yeah. That's fantastic. I think there's power in numbers for sure. And also,
definitely.
I always think if one branch or organization is doing something that's been very successful or even has been a failure, but they've learned some fantastic lessons from that, to be able to share them with others is really important.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
definitely.
And something that we talk to our guests about is overcoming obstacles, because obstacles will present themselves wherever we may be or whatever
Yeah.
sectors. But I think in this space, the space of sustainability, preservation, conservation, it's really important. So, is there a
Mhm.
particular obstacle that you faced at POW that, as an organization, that you've overcome the challenge or you've learned something that you'd like to share with us about it?
I mean, I think there's a more general lesson and there's a more specific lesson. So I think
Mm,
the more general for me is it sometimes interacting with people, you can get the feeling that they're like, oh, that's great that you do NGO work and that's nice. It's nice to have and that's so amazing. I applaud you for your courage. And I think with that comes a bit of a condescending way of looking at NGO work and like, oh, that's nice. It's a nice to have, but we're not willing to pay for it.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's something that we all face, which is like, yeah, no, that's amazing, and we can give you some visibility and stuff, but we can't pay you, and I think that's really a struggle for us because it's like, yeah, okay, great, but like, how are we gonna pay our like staff, and how are we gonna pay our rent for our offices, and like, like things like that, I think are really difficult, and those are obstacles that are shared by, I think, any NGO working in environmental or like social sector that it's seen as something that it's almost like frowned upon if you ask for money. And it's like, I mean, like money as in like in a business sense,
Mm,
not like, oh, can you be kind and donate to us? But like, no, actually, if we do something for you, like if we advertise an event for somebody, like that might cost money. And I think that's something that needs to change in the overall sector. Like if we're willing to pay X amount of stuff for an event in the private sector, why are we not willing to pay that if it's an NGO that hosts that? And I think a more specific thing, a challenge that we're facing at the moment is it feels like with the multiple crises going on in the world and Switzerland and people being more focused on maybe questions around economic safety and security, it feels like climate causes can be a bit invisible or become a bit more invisible and people like caring less about it. And I
mm,
think that's a massive obstacle to get people to keep people involved. And I think what I've learned through that is that sometimes we focus on maybe giving too much attention to those people who are like, oh, but like now is not the time to talk about the climate. And we forget about all the people that are still so motivated around the cause and that care so much and they're so passionate. And so I think for me, like that obstacle can be overcome by actually refocusing and recentering the people that are really motivated, like work with them and be sure that they can also have the means and the motivation and the sense of community to empower more people so that we can get climate back
yeah.
on the table.
Yeah, those are really valid points. It's something that comes up a lot in, I'd say, the sector is, like you said, people are really interested in the causes, very grateful for the work that's being done, but when it comes to the financial backing, it's not a priority. And I
Mhm.
often think sometimes we've, the way we allocate our funds is just very mismatched.
Mhm.
We need to put money in sectors that impact everyone. And certainly the environment is one of those. It affects everybody. So you would think that people would be more inclined to support it financially because it's the only place that we live. It's where we
Yeah.
draw everything from. Everything comes back to the natural world. So yes, I can understand that that can at times be discouraging. And yeah, it's one of those big fundamental questions that I always come back to, like, oh, but why aren't we investing in this? And why
Yeah.
are we investing in things that to me seem like trinkets or gadgets when
Yeah.
not as essential to life on the planet? So I think that's a really important point that you bring up. And something I just wanted to talk about quickly is when we talk about, and it's something that I think maybe we missed in our previous conversation, but because Switzerland is an alpine nation, because we have glaciers and we have snow and we have permafrost, we really see the landscape changing, but that's also a safety issue.
Yes, for
Um,
sure.
and we notice this even for summer recreation. And I'm just wondering if that's something that is also part of your education outreach, is kind of the safety with melting permafrost and what that means in the summer months and what that means
Yeah.
in winter. And is this something that POW has a focus on?
I mean, I think it's definitely part of our work to educate people around it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a major focus,
Mm-hmm.
but we have, for example, we have an education kit that was developed in cooperation with the Swiss Alpine Club.
Oh, good.
So to learn about how both in summer and in winter, like the effects of climate change are impacting on safety. Like, for example, for winter, you can see like avalanche activity changing. There's with like extreme weather events, you can have like massive snowfalls like all at once, and then again, like it heats up. So that will really change the patterns that like the snowpack forms over the winter and like the way that avalanches can be triggered or can come maybe in bigger sizes. So that's more the winter element. But also, as you mentioned, like melting permafrost is a huge concern for the alpine huts. Like I think something crazy like 1 in 3 alpine huts is threatened by the melting permafrost, which means that this really, really important infrastructure for outdoor people, like going into the mountains, will need massive works. And like I think we will have to see how we can keep that up for the future. I think you can also see it, like for example, if you think about Concordia Hut, the axes, like they need to add ladders
Yes.
to go further and further down to the glacier because it's retreating. Like things like this can make it more difficult to access places. I mean, this is maybe a smaller worry, but like also routes that used to be safe are not safe anymore because you're affected by rockfall. It's maybe where there used to be glacier is no glacier anymore. So like the sides of a mountain can be really steep. So it's almost like if you have to cross the Bergschrund, like it can be really difficult to get to a place where it used to be way easier. So I think it's impacting on the routes that we take.
Yeah.
And then also, even if you're not going to the mountains, if you think about events like the landslide in Val Rosek in 2024 that basically had a massive part of the mountain come down and just like pour into the valley. That's not even, you don't even have to be in the mountain to be affected by that. That's like coming even down to the valley. So I think all of these concerns are really real. And I think people are also noticing that they're coming closer to us.
Yeah.
And they're coming in at a higher frequency. So I think it's something that we definitely need to inform on and keep pushing. I mean, keep pushing for climate measures because otherwise we're going to be repairing and like, maintaining paths. And I think you were also talking about the hiking paths. I think we see hiking paths being closed because of
Mm.
drought and fire. We see them being closed because they've been washed out by massive rainfalls. So all of these infrastructures for tourism and recreation are really threatened. And if we don't put measures in place to stop the root causes, we're going to keep investing so much more in repair and maintaining these structures. So yeah.
Yeah. This is where the long-term changes really need to happen instead of, like you say, just kind of putting a band-aid over it. And
Yeah.
I think that Concordia Hute is a great example. Like we can keep adding ladders, but real issue here is that we really need to make some changes, and I think policy changes as well. Um,
Sure.
As we kind of wind down today, Maren, is there anything else about POW Switzerland that you'd like to share with us or that perhaps we didn't cover?
I think I think you covered a lot of points. I mean, it's hard for me to know what's the most interesting point for other people to know, but I think generally, yeah, if people are interested in the work, check us out on social media and follow us and yeah, subscribe to the newsletter. So I think
Yeah.
that's all I can say.
Yeah, I think it's important that people know that if they perhaps have a special skill or would like to
Yeah,
be involved, that you're very open to them reaching out to you.
for sure, yeah.
Yeah. And do you do any work with schools?
Every now and then we do work with schools where we go and have like a an adapted educational program for like younger audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also because we're such a small organization and at the moment we're really focused on systemic work and politics.
Yeah.
We have less resources at the moment to do it, so it's less of a focus than it used to be, and maybe also less of a focus than it is in other countries.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's certainly fair because there's only so much you can do with the resources you have.
Yeah,
Okay, we're going to move into our rapid fire round where we just throw a couple of questions at you and you answer
sure.
what comes to mind.
Okay.
So what are you personally most passionate about or driven by when it comes to the protection and preservation of the environment?
I mean, I think as I said before, for me, it's all always linked to also social, like social implications. So I think what I'm passionate about is the chance that we have, if we get it right, the chance that we would have for like a carbon neutral future that is also just like a renewed, almost like a renewed social contract, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. Okay, what are you optimistic about for the future?
I think I think we see that so many solutions that are carbon neutral, like renewable energies and stuff, becoming the economic choice also
Mhm.
because they're cheaper. And I think this really strong economic argument, even though I mean, you know that I have like I think there's an ethical obligation to to change our societies, but I think it's not maybe enough to convince a lot of people. Like economic arguments are always stronger, and this really strong economic argument for renewables makes me hopeful.
Yeah. What is one thing that people listening can do that would have an impact, a positive impact on the environment? I think it's always important to give people little bits of, like you had mentioned earlier, maybe you take the train and then you find that that's actually more enjoyable than sitting in
Mhm.
traffic, or you decide that you're just going to try to incorporate less meat into your diet and cook different meals. So, is there one thing that you would recommend people can do today that would have a positive effect on the environment?
I think it's overcome the fear of saying the wrong thing, and thinking that you have nothing to say because you're not perfect. Like I think we are all on different parts of our journey, you know, in the environmental movement. And I think there's many people who get discouraged because they're like, maybe somebody made like a negative comment or like made them feel like they're not perfect because they took the plane to see somebody or like I don't know. That's not the point. Like, don't get discouraged by that and like have the awkward conversation anyway. Like, yeah. So I think that's for me is the most powerful thing in creating a movement and keeping it alive.
Yeah, I love that you said that because we met with Anna Smoothie from Circles
Mhm.
Supply Co. And
I
before
see.
we met, we were just kind of bantering and talking, and it wasn't being recorded. And she said, "What if you started all your podcasts with, I still fly, or I
Yeah.
sometimes eat meat?" And she said, because one of her favorite podcasts was talking about a particular sector, but she said by saying that, it highlights the fact that you're not perfect, and we're still living in a world that you kind of can't get around some of these main issues. I mean, we have
Yeah.
our family is based in the US, so of course we fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Exactly. And
I think it's a really powerful statement that you said that we're not perfect. And I do like that with Jeremy Jones starting the organization as an elite athlete, and particularly with the work that he did. He's flying around the world, probably constantly for races, for expeditions, and he understands that. But that's also given him the opportunity to see these changes and how they're affecting different parts of the globe. So while yes, there is a carbon footprint involved in that, there's also power in seeing places that you essentially may not have had the opportunity without that flight.
yeah, and I mean hopefully this will lead to change where like races, like the race calendar and stuff will be adjusted in a way that you don't have to fly around the planet 5 times.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I think it's really, really important because I think there's also such a like there's big corporate interest in us discussing amongst individuals about like our individual carbon footprint, which was like invented by the oil industry, and not looking at what they're doing and putting the pressure on them, and they keep making profits while I tell you not to eat meat, like of course that is important because again, like as individuals, we do have an impact, but it's not enough. And I think if that is what's stopping us, then like that's really, really counterproductive. So I think yes, let's keep doing what we can do and let's not try to be perfect.
Yeah. And let's not be afraid to enter conversations that might be uncomfortable for us, because
Exactly.
I think that's where the growth happens. And I think some of the awareness that we really need to gain is part of those hard conversations. So
Yeah.
thanks for saying that. I think it's a really important piece of this very big puzzle. And Maren, do you have a book that has had the most impact on you? And it doesn't have to be a book about glaciers or the environment. Some people are like, yeah, but it's like it's fiction. Should I say it? Yeah, please say it.
Um, yeah, so I mean, I want to say it's like a book that maybe got me onto a journey. So it's like it's related, but it's not about glaciers. It was the book Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, which was
Mm.
like I remember reading that in high school and I was like, huh, that's really fucked up. The way that we treat animals, the way that we built this whole economy around this. And like, I think it really made me start thinking and like asking questions that got me where I am today. So I think I would say that had like, obviously that's a book that I read like ages ago, but it had such a big impact on me at the time. But more recently, I've read one that's really nice. That's called The Intersection of Environmentalist by Leah Thomas. And I think that one's really interesting because I mean, you heard it, like for me, environmental causes are also always linked to social causes and like thinking together, the social justice movement and environmental justice movement, I think is so powerful. So that one is a more recent one that has like really got me thinking. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's the key point of a book, is that as you're reading through it, it causes you to kind of take a step back and see things in a very different light.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
quite powerful. Okay, and then as our final question, do you believe that one person has the power to impart positive change?
What if I said no? No.
That's okay. You can say no. Some people
No,
have.
no, no, but I don't believe it. I mean, I think social change is like made up by so many tipping points. And I think if you think about it, that accumulation, it's an accumulation of individual actions, and you don't know, maybe your action could be contributing to a tipping point for a more positive change. So I think maybe you think that your individual action doesn't have any impact, but that's not true because like we're social animals, so we learn from each other, we copy the behavior that a person has, so you never know maybe at what point of a social tipping point you were at. So yes, I think we can have a very positive impact as individuals, and individual action is always at the beginning of a bigger movement, so it's always worth it.
Yeah, I love that. Maren, thank you for your time today. We truly appreciate it. And I think it's really important. Our goal at reVyven is to really highlight those organizations that are taking perhaps one issue or a larger issue and tackling it in a very positive way. So the work you're doing at POW fits that beautifully. So thank you. And how can people find you? How can they find the organization? What is your
Um,
website, social media page?
yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for giving Pao the chance to be heard. You can find us at protectourwinters.ch. And if you go on social media, it's at Protect Our Winters Switzerland.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and we're really looking forward to hearing about the event that you'll launch in May, but then that'll kind of carry us through with what sounds like different events throughout the year, and that you're
Yes.
really hoping people get involved and turn out. And this is a great way for people on the ground to be part of the work you're doing at POW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's any way that we can support you in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was nice to chat to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that our paths cross, because we find that in this space, everyone is somehow interlinked,
Mhm.
which is really a beautiful thing. So, and we all tend to kind of know the same people. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's true.
sure
It's not
at
that big, but
some point throughout the year, we'll run into each other.
oh, that would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to be awesome and share this podcast with your friends. Click subscribe, rate, and review. Do you have a story to tell? An organization you'd like to tell the world about? We love to hear from you and our global community. So please get in touch with us at reVyven.com. That's reVyven.com. Or send us an email at reVyven.com@gmail.com.